Molly draws something very important. O'Brien forgot his wife was pregnant. Oops. And Jake and Miles go over the interphasic coil scanner, ODN recouplers, and quantum flux regulator, Mark III. Hey, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
We're joined by a very special guest and friend of the show, Mr. Robert Hewitt Wolfe.
Hey.
All the way from cyberspace. My name is Ryan T. Husk. Today we're doing a quick review, fun review, awesome review of Deep Space Nine's Season 4, Hard Time.
What's up, everybody? I'm Cirroc Lofton from the Seventh Rule podcast, and I'll be at STSF this year in the Bay Area, celebrating with our friends at Creation.
Okay. Cirroc's also from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. You might recognize him from that. And my name is Ryan T. Husk of The Seventh Rule. You've got to go to this convention. It's March 8th through 10th, just south of San Francisco in Burlingame, right by the airport. You're going to love it. There are already well over 20 Star Trek and sci-fi guests, tons of panels. This is March 8th through 10th. CreationEnt.com. That's CreationEnt.com to get tickets and to get your hotel. We can't wait to see you there.
Yeah, I'll be there. Ryan will be there. And we'll represent the Seventh Rule podcast.
And Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Hard Time, directed by Alexander Singer. Teleplay by Mr. Robert Hewitt Wolfe. Story by Daniel Keyes Moran and Lynn Barker. I don't know them. Did they pitch more than one?
Daniel Keyes Moran is a science fiction novelist. And he was partnered with Lynn. I'm not quite sure how that came about. But they did get invited to pitch. I'm not sure whether they may have written a spec together. I'm not sure. And they came in and pitched this to me. I feel like during season 2.
Wow.
And then it
really?
took a long time to get it to move forward. And I feel like they originally pitched it. I think it was a Bashir story, but I'm not 100% sure. So might have been a Kira story. I can't even remember anymore. It's been a long time. And it took so long for me to kind of sell everyone on it that we lost track of them. Like we couldn't find them. This is back in the day, right? And none of their contact information was good anymore.
Well, did you try Facebook?
Yeah. No. There was no Facebook. There was no Twitter. There was barely an internet. So I think we ended up, I don't even know. I just asked Paramount to track the guy down because I'd sold it essentially to Ira. And I think they looked for Daniel, not Lynn, because Daniel or Dan, I'm not sure what he goes by, to be honest, is a novelist and was probably a little easier to find. Mm-hmm. I do remember one story where they did find a Daniel Moran in New York, and it wasn't him, but it was a guy who was an ex-NYPD detective and a PI, and he offered to find him for us.
I can find him for you, though.
I can find him for you, though. I'm not him, but I can find him for you. I don't know whether that's how they found him or not. I feel like they went through his publisher, right? Yeah, it was tough, and then we finally found him, and he'd sort of given up. I mostly spoke to him. I barely talked to Lynn. He and Lynn weren't working together anymore, so we had to make sure we got her paid too because they pitched it together in the first place. And he'd kind of given up on writing for the show in the interim. It'd been 2 years, so I don't think he'd really even watched the show. And so, yeah, it was it was a whole thing, but it all worked out.
Sounds like a whole thing.
It was a thing, but it was a cool story, and I think it turned out to be a really good episode.
Do you recall how he responded when you just kind of came out of nowhere and said, "Hey," a couple years later?
I think he was surprised, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think he was a little pissed because there was actually a Voyager story that had some elements that were similar to this, and I think he had gotten it into his head that maybe that it had been stolen from him in some way, shape, or form. The episode was completely different, and we sort of, once we talked him down a little bit, it all worked out.
I can't think of the Voyager episode that would have these elements in it.
I don't really. It was a first season episode, I want to say, and I don't really, or maybe a second season episode, and I have no idea which one it was. But it was something about implanted memories as a punishment of some kind.
Okay,
there was some version of that. Anyway, obviously that wasn't the case. I was sitting on the story. I was trying to find him and trying to sell Ira on it for 2 years, and finally did. And yeah, so it all worked. We worked it all out. But yeah, it was just a little bit of more of an odyssey than usual to actually buy the story. Usually it's pretty simple. And in the interim, I think also, that kind of ate up a lot of our time. So that's why, sometimes in these freelance situations, we offered the freelancer the chance to write the script. But in this case, we'd sort of unfortunately eaten up all our time. And so I ended up writing it myself.
Since you brought up the implanted memories, do you think that that's a more humane way to punish people? Because my first thought immediately was like, wow, that's so cool. That's so humane. It's smart. They said it's financially better. There's all these things. I'm like, that's a great idea. Obviously, we don't have the technology now. I'm not pitching for it because we know that's impossible. But then when we saw what he goes through, it's better for the family. The family gets to see him the next day, basically.
I think it's that's why I think it was an idea to do, and I think that was Dan and Lynn's idea at the beginning. And I think that the idea is, it should sound like, okay, it's no big deal, right? You just had these fake memories put in, 20 years of fake memories. But for O'Brien, they're real, right? And so memories of trauma doesn't really matter whether they're real or not. They're still traumatic memories, right? And that, I think, was what we thought was interesting to play with. And it does raise the question whether there is any such thing as a humane prison, no matter how you do it. The memories they implanted were particularly brutal. It wasn't exactly like, wasn't club fed or anything like that.
Do you think that they implant the memories of like HR and him doing this? Or do you think that O'Brien has control over the events? Like, this is the likely culmination of how O'Brien would have acted in this situation? Or are they just writing it and he's a passenger?
I think it's probably a bit of a combination. I feel like it's probably scripted to a certain extent, but I think the outcome of how that's scripted probably varies from patient or prisoner to prisoner, And I think this is what, O'Brien would say, this is me. I did this, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think it was completely, I think it's a video game in some ways, it's a really small enclosed VR video game that they're putting in his head. And I think he does get to make decisions in it, but it's a horrible situation. It's not like they're setting him into a situation, there's probably multiple points along the way where he could go, he could do something horrible, and O'Brien held out against the horrors for a long, long time. He didn't kill Ishar on the first day or anything, but I think I suspect that while there's free will involved, I suspect that the vast majority of people who run through this particular scenario end up doing something horrible to either themselves or HR by the end of it.
So like bowling with the bumpers up.
Yeah. The ball's going down there, I think so. Like it's like when you're playing D&D and the DM just wants you to do this scenario and has the dungeon all ready to go, and like he's gonna make you do it, So it's gonna be some variation of that. You're not going away from this because he or she is prepped and ready, and that's the scenario that's going to get run.
Now you're talking Sirach's language when you mentioned Dungeons and Dragons.
There you go.
Oh yeah, I'm all over that.
Yeah, this is against the Frost Giants. You're going to fight the Frost Giants. There's no other. You're going to get railroaded into this because that's the one that he or she's got ready.
Right, now we're really going down a nerdy hole here.
Deep nerd. Deep nerd.
I like it though. Well, Sirach, I don't know. What do you think of this episode? To me, it was a very memorable episode, and I as soon as I heard the title, I was like, oh, I bet it's the one where Miles gets stuck in that thing for 20 years or whatever. It really it stands out to me. It's because it's different than any episode we've seen in Deep Space Nine. It's a totally different idea. It's a totally different theme. And it's another one that doesn't really have a B plot so much. I mean, it almost feels like, I don't know, maybe you guys can speak on this better than I can, but it almost feels like the B plot is O'Brien's hallucinations of Echar later on, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, structurally it doesn't really have a B story. Structurally it was the kind of story where it's tough to go to a B story,
Right.
Because the whole thing is about him being sort of stuck in his head and stuck in this moment and stuck in this situation. So you kind of want the audience to be there too. To cut away to a B story would probably let the tension out of it. We didn't do that all the time. It was rare that we did that, but we did it occasionally where we just didn't have a B story. And I think that this is one of those instances, and it works well, I would say. But yeah, there's no real official B story, that's for sure.
Yeah, we just did one that didn't have a B story, right? But I think it might have been Rules of Engagement or a session. One of them just didn't even have one. Well, it's because this has two stories built into it. There's the story that you see behind me and the story afterwards. So it already has two stories going simultaneously. Yeah,
I mean, in a weird way, the B story would be the flashbacks to Echar and the memories, But it's just one of those episodes where we didn't do it. Like I'm trying to think of another one. Little Green Men, right? Doesn't have a B story, I don't think.
Well, the B story, I guess, would be the people trying to bring them back. No, that wasn't even in.
I don't think there is anything like that.
Little
Green Men. Past tense, the B story is the people bringing.
That's
them
what
back,
I was saying.
Right?
That's the one, yeah.
But yeah, this one doesn't really have one, and it works without it. I think
if you put in a B story, there wouldn't be enough to tell the actual story.
And like I said, it would let the air out of the balloon. This is really a story about a man trapped in a place and trapped in a moment. And so like I said, you want the audience to be along for that ride. And that B story, cutting away to Jake learning how to fight with a bat'leth from Worf or something like that wouldn't have been very satisfying.
Well, he did teach O'Brien about whatever it was that I said at the top. Interphasic coil spanner, ODN recoupler, and quantum flux regulator, Mark III. Sirach, do you remember that scene at all? Shooting?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I do, actually. And one of my headshots are actually taken from this episode. So while I was watching it, that was one thing that I noticed. So, hey, that's my headshot right there. So as I was watching it, I said, oh, they must have got it from here. That's pretty cool. But so, no, I do remember a little bit of it, but not too much of it. And it was just a few lines in this thing.
Mm-hmm. And the tough lines were on Column for that one. How cool was it that Column just completely carried that episode? And you guys probably knew that he could already. I mean,
that's part of why we kept giving these kinds of episodes to him, because he can carry the whole thing. And just because he's a terrific actor and just, could carry and could go to all the emotional places we wanted him to go, which is why, we used to call these the O'Brien Must Suffer episodes that we would do once a year.
I didn't realize you guys said that, because the whole
I feel
internet,
like we did. Yeah. Or maybe the internet did. I don't know. I don't remember what the origin of the term is, but it's really a compliment to Colm, right? Because he could kill with these episodes. He'd do such a great job. But the other thing was the character was set up the best for it too. Because he had a pregnant wife, young daughter, And so if it were Bashir going through, which I think was who it was originally proposed for, he just there aren't as many people depending on him in the same way, And even Cisco, Jake is old enough that when there are some Cisco Must Suffer episodes too, There's plenty of plenty of crazy, I mean, in a weird way, like Visitor is a Cisco suffering episode, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't carry quite the same weight in some ways, just because by this point, Jake is like 16 years old, I think. Is that about right? 17, maybe?
About 16, 17. Yeah, right there.
Yeah, somewhere in there, right? So that character isn't as dependent on his father as like Molly and Keiko are, like, you know, and Cisco's not married. So it just the stakes are clearer and stronger with O'Brien, especially when you do these kinds of episodes, because it's just so clear. Like, if he doesn't get his stuff together, he's not the only.
You could say it.
You know, whatever. He's not the only victim, right? And that makes the episode more powerful.
Yeah. Was Molly a victim, or was she the villain?
Yeah, she's the antagonist.
She was very aggressive with her poor suffering dad. She's like, "Daddy, hurry up and look at my coloring."
No, she's clearly the victim. We should have had Hannah on.
Well, yeah, actually, Hannah's moving right now, so she's not really available to come on. But as we're watching this, I was thinking, damn, I would have loved to have her, because she was also in one like just a couple weeks ago too. But they're moving. But yeah, she had a lot of scenes and a lot of lines, and she even had like the final moment.
Yeah,
I don't know, I really liked it.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, everyone in this is the victim, right? The antagonists are mostly off screen for the entire episode. The bad guys just sort of do their thing and then split out in the teaser. They're done. So it's really all about the after effects, right? And that's what I really wanted to do an episode about. You know, I mean, this is obviously a lot of it is about PTSD, and which was not a super hip thing at the time to talk about, but it was in the consciousness, right. I think, at least a little bit.
You're right. We've made a lot of huge strides in that recently only. Sorry, what were you saying, Strzok?
No, Robert, you said PTSD, and you just kind of triggered something for me. I just wanted to know if that was what the impetus behind this whole episode was. Was that the story you were trying to tell?
Yeah, that for me was really what the story was about. That was really, I think, what I was going for more than anything. I mean, you know, my wife at the time, still my wife, but at the time my wife was a psychotherapist, so she was very familiar with that. And she was working with some high school kids who were struggling with some issues. My father was a war veteran, so he certainly had his demons.
Right.
And that I think was really my interest in the episode more than anything, was like as a cool way to sort of get into those effects of what happens to someone when they go through trauma and when they're struggling with trauma, you know, with past trauma. So that was really what it was about.
Hold that thought. I definitely want to talk about that a bit more. We have to take our break super quick. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Seventh Rule with Strzok Lofton.
Hello.
We have writer, superstar, producer extraordinaire, Mr. Robert Hewitt Wolfe today, regaling us and teaching us all things writing. Here are some quick trivioids that you may or may not like. Chief O'Brien draws a line in the sand. That's okay. We'll mark that under not like.
I guess you could say that.
Chilash fruit makes Miles feel better. O'Brien forgot his wife was pregnant. Oops. Chief has 3 counseling sessions a week with Counselor Telnori. I did kind of wish we met Counselor Telnori.
Yeah, me too.
Just to see what he was like, because it's clearly some kind of alien with a name like that.
Yeah.
HR likes to draw Isikas on the ground. Jake and Chief go over the interphasic coil, spanner, ODN, recoupler, quantum flux regulator, whatever. Molly draws something very important. All right. There's only so much techno babble I can survive in a 1 hour span. So anyway, you were saying about the PTSD, because that definitely came through in the episode. It was very clearly about that. It was not just about the memories that he was having, but how he was reacting towards everybody else. And what I had forgotten until just watching it again was how powerfully it affects Miles. Not the memories weren't what was driving him to consider suicide. It was how he's affecting everybody else. So he's very cognizant of the fact that he is hurting other people. He's not looking at himself like a victim. He's looking at himself like, I'm the monster. I'm doing bad things to people I care about. And I thought that was a really good depiction of PTSD, because they're not always thinking, I'm this victim, I'm this victim. They're thinking, God, I'm being terrible to other people, which makes them feel so much worse. And it's this terrible burden to carry.
Yeah, again, like I think my wife helped a lot with some of the real of all that. I talked to her a ton about it when I was writing this one, and when we were breaking it, just to make sure that we were trying to get it as accurate as we could. And she's got a master's in psychology and was a practicing counselor at the time, so I think she brought a lot to the table with that. I don't think the episode would be as good. I just think I feel like some of the rage issues, the suicidality, I think that was the stuff that was hyper alertness, agitation type stuff. I think that was some of the stuff that she brought to the table. Again, it's 20 years. Well, 25 years, right? It's 25 years. So I can't remember all the conversations we had. I just remember we had a lot of conversations. I mean, the hallucinations and the memories in some ways are the least realistic, but they're the most cinematic, And so we definitely leaned into those. But the details of like how he was suffering and what he was going through and what he was thinking, I think that was the stuff that she helped the most with.
Yeah, you're right. 25.
So anything that's good is a credit to her, and anything that doesn't ring true was us in the writers' room doing writers' nonsense.
What about the people that pitched it? That's all the other stuff.
I think that I can't remember how much was left from the original pitch, but obviously the kernel of the idea and how it would be a psychological study in trauma was definitely part of the original pitch. So. I think that I feel like the original pitch was, I want to say, like noisier. There was a lot more events in it, I feel like, and I think we really pared it down to just, it's O'Brien, it's his memories, and it's what he's dealing with, and just like made it a very simple story. To give room for all the character stuff, right, and to give calm, and everyone he got to work with in this episode chances to shine, I think that's really where we're coming from.
Yeah. Sirach, every time Cisco has one of his dressing down moments, I always think of you, because I know those are some of your favorite moments, where Cisco is just like, oh, by the way, I'm about to remind you of your place. And even when O'Brien says, like, hey, as a personal favor to me, mano y mano, buddy, remember I let you beat me at darts the other day or whatever, even I did think, because I'd forgotten, I did think it was going to sway Cisco. I thought he was going to be like, well, okay, but no, but he's just like, look, this is what I have to tell you. I'm your boss and I'm going to do it. And he's very comfortable and forceful when he's just saying, you got to do it. You're relieved of duty.
Yeah, he really stays on this really rigid line of principles and morality. Cisco is really strict on when it comes to that. He doesn't like to waver too much when he's set his feet in on what he believes is true or right. But, when I was watching this episode, one of the things that came to my mind, Robert, was Twilight Zone. And
wow, yeah.
I thought of this episode called The Last Man on Earth. I don't know if you remember that episode.
Is that the Burgess Meredith one where he breaks his glasses?
No, that's also a good one where he likes to read and he breaks his glasses at the end. No, this is the one where the guy, he feels like he's the only man on the world. He's walking down the town, and everywhere he goes, he sees a cigarette is burning or coffee's on the table, but there's nobody there. He walks into the movie theater and there's a movie playing, but no one is in the theater, and he's just walking around and there's no one there anywhere, but it seems as if somebody was just there at some point, right? And at the end of this Twilight Zone episode, and I don't know if I'm sure I messed the name up, but at the end of the episode, we find that it was really an experiment, that he was put in isolation in this little pod, and that this feeling of him being the only man in the world was only the result of this experiment. And so as I was watching this, that was one of the thoughts that came to my mind, was this kind of experimental thing that you kind of highlighted on. It was like this experimental, basically, rehabilitation with prison reforms. So I just wanted you to get in a little bit about that.
Yeah, now I vaguely remember that episode, but yeah, there were a lot of like studies done, and I feel like in the 60s and 70s, some of them like horrible and illegal, where they went into like this whole idea of like sensory deprivation, or like trying to create hallucinogenic experiences that could re-educate people or change them. And yeah, so that was probably that may very well be part of what was the original impetus for Dan and Lynn to pitch the show in the first place. But we were, I think to us, the sort of the tech of it, whether this was real and whether it was based on real experiments and things like that, was probably just the least important part. To be honest, this is one of those episodes where the science fiction is much more about the fiction than the science. And I think it was just really, we were much more interested in this story of O'Brien's personal trauma and PTSD. And ultimately, I think, one of the big things that we wanted to say was like, O'Brien's going to get help for this because that's what you should do. And it's going to take time. He's going to take his medicine. He's going to see his counselor 3 times a week, and he'll get better. But this is not something that just is going to go away, and like they're not going to run a magic Star Trek thing over his head and now he's better. That this is something that is just like in real life going to be a struggle for him, and it's going to be hard work for him, and it's going to be therapy for him.
Right.
And one of my big regrets, honestly, is we never saw that again. I wanted to revisit it, Yeah. And I think on a show now you would. A show now would probably, you'd see him in counseling and you'd follow him, and you probably wouldn't do this whole arc in one episode. You'd probably use this as a B story or a recurring C story for O'Brien that would run over the course of 3 or 4 episodes and get to the same place. And then he'd get that catharsis with Bashir, and then you'd still see him going to counseling every once in a while, and that would become part of the show. Right.
Wow. That would be so cool. And then you do see the sessions with the doctor, Telnori,
and all that stuff. But that's just not how we did it back then. Like that just wasn't, they let us do a certain amount of continuity on the show, but they didn't let us do that. Like we weren't going to be able to do that. So that's always been one of the biggest things that I've sort of regretted about the episode, in addition to O'Brien's prosthetic beard. But
I do want to get into that though after you're done here.
But the fact that we couldn't revisit it, this episode was about the fact that this was going to take time for him to recover from, and that he was rightfully seeking out help and using that professional help, the medicine and the counseling. And the fact that we never got to follow it up sort of made it feel like it was just, that's it, the end, magically everything's fine. Where, of course, in the real world, it would be years of work to get completely over something like this. And you never really be over it. You just have to learn. You'd learn tools to not have it screw yourself up all the time. So that's what we wanted, but we didn't get to do that. We had to jam it all into 42 minutes.
So you didn't like the beard? Was it the?
Yeah. I thought it was a little over the top, personally, but whatever. I mean,
he has to have a beard, right?
I think he does have to have one. There's no way they're shaving him, right? He's just thrown in there like a wild animal.
But he looked a little too wild animal-y for you.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not a makeup person. Our makeup people were great. I mean, don't get me wrong; they were terrific. I just in rewatching it, I was like, wow, that's a lot of prosthetic. That's a lot of fake hair on his face.
Yeah, there were stages. I think it was growing in as they were showing different periods. So there were
Yeah.
some stages I didn't like as much as others.
Yeah, there were some stages that looked great, and then there were some stages that were like, that's a little regrettable, to be honest.
By the way,
Yeah.
can we talk a second about the actor that played Ichar?
Yeah, he was great.
I was, upon watching it this time, I was like, this guy is so good at being likable. Like,
Yeah.
like just being like this guy. Like, you know, the best you guys can do is write a character that's likable, but it's up to the actor to, you know, either hit that role well or even add, you know, preferably add more to it, make it even better. And this guy he was just so good at the way he spoke and his cadence and his little smiles and he was like immediately very best friendy, you know. What a great actor. I should have looked him up beforehand, but I don't know. I wanted to see what you felt about
Craig
him.
Wasson.
Mm-hmm.
Craig Wasson, I thought he was terrific. I thought that he was really, really good. I mean, he brought a lot of humanity. That part required a lot of humanity, and he absolutely brought that 100%. You know, he just totally nailed that part. He was so good. And I'm trying to remember. I feel like he was the lead in Body Double or something. He was either he was the star of Body Double, maybe that Brian De Palma movie. And you know, so clearly like a really strong actor. I think he you know, he was just one of those guys. He didn't have a tremendous career, or he may still be working for all I know, but but that was his big starring turn, you know, was that, I think.
Yeah, looking him up, he stopped working about 15 years ago, at least as far as IMDb is concerned. But he's got 80 credits, so he definitely did a lot of things, but probably nothing to, you know, jump out at you. You know, he's done like Walker, Texas Ranger. He did one Star Trek thing, Touched by an Angel. There was one role that it says he played a pornographer. So I don't know.
Yeah, but like, yeah, he was the lead in a big Hollywood movie, and you know, it's kind of like, I think, you know, as Sirach can attest, the actor's life is a tough one, you know. But this guy's clearly very talented, and you know, anybody who can, again, I always, you know, people who can go on and get all that makeup on their face and still come through, that's a big talent. You know, that's a lot. That's a very underrated ability to do that.
And confirmed about Body Double, by the way, 1984. He did play, but do you know what the character's name was? I didn't know this. Jake.
No, really? Okay.
That's funny. That's funny. Yeah, look, I mean, it's like I said, Sirach can speak to this. The actor's life is full of like ups and downs, and we just happen to catch a guy who, you know, definitely is skilled enough to carry a whole movie, and we got to have him as our number one guest star.
Yeah.
I thought, Sirach, you were going to jump in about the actor's life being hectic or whatever, but you're like, just
yeah, I do know about the actor's life being hectic. Yeah, it can be somewhat stressful sometimes, especially when we get those kind of rewrites, Robert, that you used to give us.
Every time we talk, you get on me about the rewrites. That wasn't my fault.
He never mentions it any other time.
Yeah. The last minute rewrites again. Like, I cannot tell you how we hated them as much as everybody did, but it was just like the way the show was. I think I showed you guys the marked up script the last time, and we were just always getting notes from like Rick, or there were always stuff. There was stuff that we're trying to fix all the time and adjust for production and things like that. It was just a never ending moving target until the day we shot.
Were there any times where you would get that last second note and you're like, oh boy, here we go. And then you looked at it, you're like, wow, that's a really good note. Thank God.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, thank God we got this in time.
Sure. There's plenty of times where we got last minute stuff that it was like made the show better. Sometimes you could argue that wasn't the case and it was a lateral move, you know?
Right.
But there were absolutely situations where like, oh, that's better. Or even like, I mean, the one that stands out always is the root beer scene in Way of the Warrior, which was done clearly was just on to fill time. Like we were short and they were like,
wow,
write a scene that we can shoot tomorrow with two of these three actors on one of these 4 sets, you know, because that's who we've got. And that's who's going to be in makeup. And, you know, and it needs to be 3 minutes long, you know? So yeah, and that turned out to be a great scene. A lot of the times the changes would make things better. But it was hard on us and it was really hard on the actors. I you know, 4 actors are sitting there like, you know, eating lunch and they get change pages that affect the afternoon work that they've already memorized. That's no fun.
No, I'm sorry I give you a hard time. It's not your fault.
No, it's all right.
Hard time.
I'm always giving you a hard time for no reason. It's part of the process, and we're all trying to do our part. So I know you're not trying to make my life miserable. We just sometimes think that.
No, it's all good, man. You also didn't see us often enough to give us enough crap to like, you know, so you've got all this stored up, like, you know.
Yeah, I got it pent up. It's been built
we
up.
weren't on set all the time. So like when you're on set and this stuff happens, like you sort of eat crow right then and there and you say your apologies and it's like, oh, I'm sorry, I had to make these changes because of X reason or why we lost this actor or the weather is bad or the set doesn't work or whatever that makes you do these changes or we got a note from the studio or the network or whatever. Or the actor who's sitting right across from you, it was the one who wanted the changes. So deal with that. No, you don't ever throw the other actors under the bus that way. But we weren't there. So we weren't there to eat. We weren't there to eat the crap that we deserved for these last minute changes. So you've got my full permission to exercise all those demons.
You know, one other thing before I know we're getting short on time, but I did want to talk about this concept that I thought was brought up in this episode, and at least made me think about this. And one of the things that it made me think was when somebody does time in jail, is it the time that is the punishment, like the taking away X amount of years from your life? Or is it the experience of those things that happened during that time? And I thought that was another good question that was brought up by this episode.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it's probably both, but this episode certainly says the experiences matter just as much as the time, you know, and the feeling, you know, and especially when a prison system is brutal. You know, that takes a toll. The brutality, the daily brutality, the stress, the difficulties and the struggle. You know, I mean, I knew 2 people growing up. Well, one of them was Peter Allen Fields, and another was a teacher at my school who were POWs, essentially. Peter Allen Fields was a POW in the Korean War when he was very young.
Wow.
And I had a teacher who was like a missionary in China, and he was locked up by the communists for, I think, 7 years. And Peter was not locked up for very long, was not a POW for very long, from what I remember. But he had some horrific experiences that haunted him, I would say. And this teacher of mine also, you know, he was locked up for a long, long time. And I think had a combination of both horrible experiences and those lost years. I think we're all experiencing a little bit the lost years effect right now, right?
Yeah.
Because of COVID.
Right.
You know? And certainly, like, you know, for me anyway, it's not the worst. You know, I'm in a nice house and, you know, with my wife and my dog and we're managing. But
and
that's and the internet, yeah, and television and there's all the things, but still, like, it feels like a lost year, and there's some damage there. Imagine that plus traumatic experience, plus the conditions being horrific. That's just people break under those circumstances. It raises the question, and I think we wanted to raise the question whether that was the best way to deal with people who committed crimes. And I think like a lot of hopefully good fiction, it doesn't answer the question, it just raises it and asks the audience to think about that.
Okay.
Yeah, it does. It just raises more questions, and it also makes. I thought that you dealt with integrating after the experience really well. The kind of uncomfortable, the PTSD that you would feel having gone through that. And I know personally a lot of people that have been locked up and now are out, and they feel the weight of opportunities not being available for them, or people looking at them differently, or they're carrying this record around with them forever. So it is also something that I think that a lot of people are dealing with.
I think like there's an idea behind our prison system that you serve your time and then you're done. That's what it's supposed to be, I guess. Go to prison, do your years or whatever, come out, maybe you're on probation, you got to report in every once in a while, you got to toe the line. But I think it's easy to underestimate the long-term damage that kind of experience can have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's kind of what this episode is about, is like, it's not the Grathi are like, it's over. He's done. Like, he suffered, he did his time, now he's free.
But he's not done. Yeah.
But he's not really done, is he? Can you recover? It's not an easy thing to recover from having been in prison. To really there's a lot of recidivism, and a lot of people don't handle it well, unfortunately. There are definitely people who do, and God bless, manage to overcome it. But I think it's naive to talk about the prison system as something that happens and then it's done, and not acknowledge that there's a lot of baggage after that.
Mm-hmm. So we're just about out of time here, guys. I do want to point out also that there was a bullion in this episode, which made me happy. I like seeing their little blue heads popping up. It was a really cool episode, really interesting, and I'm really glad that we are understanding and talking about PTSD much more now. And episodes like this really help to highlight that, because it's a legitimate issue that people used to just shit away back in the 70s and before, but anyway, we all know about that. I do want to give a special thanks to Carmen Shamwell, PJ Thomas, TJ Jackson Bay out in Missouri, Bill Victor Arukin, Yvette Blackman, Homer Frizzell, Eve England in Wales, Anne-Marie Siegel, Titus Moeller, Tim Baum, Sue Gruner, Robert Weisberg, and Darlena Marie. And also a very special thanks to Mr. Robert Hewitt Wolfe for always making this show about 5 times cooler.
Thanks. I enjoyed doing it with you guys. I appreciate that you guys are looking at these episodes. It always feels good to think that people are still enjoying them and getting into them after all these years.
It's going to be 5 more decades at least of people appreciating this. It's just going to keep going, As
long as I get my checks.
Ciroc, I'll handle that.
No, not for me.